Good afternoon, students. So for today's class, we'll begin up a new chapter called as your anatomy of flowering plants. Okay. Now, moving on to this particular new chapter after the anatomy of the flowering plants. Now, when I say anatomy, darlings, in the last class we were speaking about the morphology. When it is a morphology, okay, when we speak about the morphology, the morphology will always deal with what, Makle? It will always deals with your external. Okay, that is what we studied in a previous class. Now, for today's class, we'll quickly begin up with the next particular thing is anatomy. Okay, now internal structures. How exactly the cells are arranged and how is the internal structures. Okay, now it is nothing but the internal structure of a plant. We are dealing with the plants, hence it is for the plants, or else it can be even the other organisms too. Okay, now moving ahead. The first thing which is very important, which you have to keep it in the mind is, children, the plant tissue is basically classified into two particular types. One is your meristematic, the second one is your permanent tissues. Yeah, we have the makla. One is your meristematic tissues, other one is your permanent tissues. When we use a terminology meristematic, that means to say these are the cells which has a capacity to divide, mean to say they keep on dividing most of the times. Am I clear to you? So they usually keep on dividing. Nan adunu helide makle, why do they divide? Because they have a thin cell wall. Am I clear to you? And please keep it in the mind, unlike your parenchymatous, these particular cells will not have your intercellular spaces. See, there is no intercellular spaces. Okay, now moving on to the particular permanent tissues, these tissues will lose the capacity to divide, mean to say there is no cell division happening. Am I clear to you? So meristematic tissues, what are these? These are the cells which have a capacity to divide, whereas your permanent tissues, they lose the capacity to divide. Okay, now under your permanent, you have two types again. A simple permanent tissue, okay, a simple permanent tissues, other one is your complex permanent tissues. Now, under your simple, there are basically three types: parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma. Chyma is not my parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. Okay, so under your complex sweethearts, you have something called as xylem and your phloem. Am I clear to you? So the basically your plant tissues, makla, what are the two types, makla? You have your meristematic tissues and your permanent tissues. So under your permanent, what you have, makla? Simple and your complex. Under your complex, what you have? Xylem and your phloem. Under simple, parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. Okay, now whenever your parenchyma and collenchyma consists of chloroplast, akasmat idrali chloroplast idre makle. Okay, so we call it as your chlorenchyma. What do we call it as, makle? We call it as your chlorenchyma. Okay, now moving ahead. Coming to your tissues. Okay, so that's coming to your tissues. Now, what is a tissues? A tissues is a group of cell having a common origin and they perform a common function. Mean to say the origin is also similar and function is also almost they perform. Am I clear to you? So what is a tissues, makla? It is a group of cells having a common origin and they perform a common function. Okay, now moving ahead, children, what is it? There are two type of the tissues. Yeah, we have drawn abagla helide makla, meristematic and your permanent. Okay, now when we speak about the meristematic, darlings, when we see meristematic, what do we usually say? It is always divisions. Okay, here what happens? The cells keep on and dividing. What happens over here, makla? The cells keep on and on dividing. So these are called as your particularly meristematic tissues. Now, sweethearts, depending on the locations wherever they are present, okay, depending on the particular locations wherever they are present, we name it so. ಎಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುತ್ತೋ ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಮೆರಿಸ್ಟಮ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೋ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ, so depending on the positions we name it so. ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ್ದು? Apical meristem, intercalary meristem, and lateral meristem. Now, what are these particular things? Moving ahead, children, listen up. When I use a terminology, apical meristem, makle, usually they are present at the tip. Am I clear to? Apical means what, makla? Usually they are present at the tip. So we call it as your apical meristem. Now, when we use a terminology called as intercalary, children, they are usually present in the nodal regions. Okay, now lateral meristem, they are present in the sides. Am I clear to you? So your apical meristem will always help in the growth of the plant. What do they help in? The growth of the plant. Mean to say, they add on the height of a plant. What do they add on, children? They add on to the height of the plant. Whereas intercalary meristem will always give rise to the branches. What do they always give rise to? They always give rise to your branches. Whereas lateral meristem, darlings, they usually help in the girth of the plant. When we use a terminology called as a girth, what do you mean by it? It is nothing but your diameter. Am I clear to you, makla? ಏನಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ ಅದನ್ನ? Diameter. Okay, so in order for, see, ಇವಾಗ ಕುಟ್ಟಿಯಾಗಿ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. Okay, so it has to enlarge. So basically this has enlarged because of the sweetheart, the lateral meristem. Am I clear to you, children? So these are the different types of the meristem. Depending on the location, we name it so. Moving on to the next one. Now look at the picture, children. This is not there in your NCRT, but still we will look into it. Okay, now coming back to over here, children, this is your shoot. Okay, this is your shoot and this is your root. Am I clear to you? Now coming back to the point, children, whenever we speak about the shoot, okay, here whatever you're seeing, children, here you will have your particular meristematic axils, nothing but your mother cells. Okay, where it will give rise to your shoot apical meristem. What it will give rise to? Shoot apical meristem. Okay, now whatever you're seeing these structures over here, am I clear to you? They are called as your leaf primordia. ಏನಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ ಅದನ್ನ? Leaf primordia. ಅಂದ್ರೆ these things will give rise to your particular leaves. Is it clear to you? What do they give rise to? The leaf. Now in this leaf region, okay, there is this outermost cells present like this. The outermost skin ತರ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಕಣ್ರೋ. Okay na? So what do we call them, makle? We call them as your protoderm. What do we call them as? Protoderm. Am I clear to you? Now can you see this region over here? Okay, where it has been attached to the leaf. Okay, now that region we call it as your nodal region. What do we call it as? Nodal region. Okay, now can you find this one which is completely bulged compared to this? Idakkinta jasti, even more it is bulged out. Okay, now what do we call this as? Axillary bud. Okay, now in the center, all these parts, okay, then the center, these parts are nothing but your pith region. What do we call it as, makla? We call it as your pith region. Okay, so many particular what to say, the in whatever you are seeing all these particular locations. Okay, this is very much important. Now moving on to the next one is your root. Always remember your root is covered by a particular tip of the cap structure called as what, makla? Root cap. Idu now last class allu odidhi morphology alli enanta root cap cover agirutte. Right above the root you have your meristematic region present. Okay, now the outermost layer, whatever you are seeing, this region. Okay, wait a second. This region, outermost region, I'm marking it in a red color. Okay, darlings, now these are nothing but your protoderm. What do we call it as? We call it as your protoderm, and followed by the protoderm, from there to here, this entire region. Am I clear to you? Those things are called as your ground meristem. What do we call it as? We call it as your ground meristem. Now right in the center, whatever I'm marking in a green color, okay, now that's nothing but your procambium. What do we call it as? We call it as your procambium. Am I clear to you? So all together, all the three are called as your primary meristems. What do we call them as? Primary meristems. And from the protoderm, you will have your root hair arising. What you will have, children? You will have your root hair arising. Am I clear to you? Now, of course, the entire root has a particular protective tissues, nothing but your root cap. Am I clear to you? So this is the entire structure of your root. Now, moving on to the next particular thing. See, children, in the stem, that is what I was speaking. This is where your intercalary meristems are present because that's your nodal region. And this is, of course, your internodal region. Now, starting ahead, the first one is your permanent tissues. Now, when we speak about the permanent tissues, what is it? They are usually structurally and functionally specialized and they have lost the ability to divide. Moral of the story, children, the permanent tissues will never divide. Am I clear to you? So, they would have lost the capacity to divide. Am I clear to you? Now, coming back to the point, children, Under permanent tissues, you had two types. You remember, one is yen makla simple permanent tissues, other one is your complex permanent tissues. When we speak about the simple permanent tissues, they're having all cells in structure and function. Aita, whereas in complex makle there are many different types. Ma'am, ಏನಿಂಗ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ simple tissue ಅಂದ್ರೆ they are made up of either parenchyma only, okay, or is either they are made up of collenchyma only. Am I clear to you? So either they will have parenchyma or either they will have collenchyma. Darling, when we speak about the complex, it's just like your xylem parenchyma, okay, xylem particular fibers. You would have heard about this. So there are basically two type of cells or more than two type of cells. So this type we usually call it as complex tissues, okay. So one is your particularly simple tissues, other one is your complex tissues. Moving ahead. Now children, whenever we speak about the simple tissues, okay, what are the types? Sweethearts, we have three different types: parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. Parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. These are the three type of your particular cells. Now, individually we'll start up. Now darling, I want you to look at the diagrams, okay. So the first one, we are starting with the parenchyma. Now children, usually parenchymas will have a very thin cell wall, okay, and of course, can you see these spaces over here, makle? Spaces kantidiyandralala, okay. Now yenro idu vela, what is that, those things, makle? They are nothing but your intercellular space. What is it, makle? You have intercellular space present. That's what we'll be learning in the next particular thing. See over here, they are usually isodiametric. What are the shape? Spherical, oval, round, polygonal, elongated. So all these are the particular shape of your cell, and cell wall is very, very thin. Am I clear to you? Now, the cell wall is made up of cellulose and they are closely packed. They do have your intercellular space present. What's the main function? Photosynthesis, storage and your secretions. What is it, children? Photosynthesis, storage and your secretions. These are your particularly the functions of your particular parenchyma cells. So, I repeat again. Parenchyma shape enide spherical, oval, round, polygonal, elongated. Cell wall hegide makla thin. What is it made up of, makla? Cellulose, okay. Now they do have your intercellular space and function, what is it? Photosynthesis, storage and your secretions. Secretions can be like in your tannins, resins, all those are your secretions, makla, okay. Now this is how it exactly looks from the microscopic view. Okay, microscopic view alli ee reetine kanad makla. Moving on to the next one is your collenchyma. Makla, in this, what is it is, the main thing they have your angular thickenings. See children, this is all your angular thickenings. Only that, they don't have your intercellular space. What do they don't have? They don't have the intercellular space. Okay. Along with that, makla, if at all you look in the center, they have a large vacuole present. What do they have? They have a large vacuole present. So there's a vacuolation happening. Am I clear to you? So basically, the collenchyma, they have a thickened cell wall. Okay. Plus they have a particularly what? The corner has a very thickenings of the cell wall. They have a vacuole present, that there is no particular intercellular spaces. So angular thickenings, vacuolation, no intercellular spaces, and the support, what is it? The main function is the mechanical support. Makla il not roile. These are all your parenchyma. Okay. Now, whereas these ones, can you see they are made by red markings? Now, these are all your angular thickenings. This is your angular thickenings. So, these are nothing but collenchyma. So, you have two cells present. These are nothing but your parenchyma. Illodi intercellular space ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಕಾಣಲ್ಲ ನಿಮಗೆ. Why? That's because it's collenchyma. That is again a microscopic view. See, I want you to remember the first statement. Below the epidermis, in dicotyledonous plants, what is the meaning of this statement means, children? The collenchyma is usually present, okay? The collenchyma is usually present in dicotyledonous plants. Where in dicotyledonous plants? The first particular layer will be your epidermis. Okay, Nendra? The first one is your epidermis. Now, right after your epidermis, makle, you will have a cell present in a polygonal shape. Now, that's nothing but your collenchyma cells. En makle ado? Collenchyma cells. Specifically, it is present in the stem. Please keep it in your mind. Hypodermis of a dicotyledonous stem is made up of your collenchyma. Talelitkombeku mariyangilla makle. Am I clear to you? So, below the epidermis, this is your epidermis, the skin layer. The next layer will be your hypodermis. What is it? Hypodermis. Specifically, I'm speaking with the dicotyledonous stem. Okay, what is it made up of? It is made up of your collenchyma cells. Moving on to the next one. The homogeneous layer, and they are usually patches. Homogeneous and they're made up of same type of the cells. See, this is all your same type of the cells. Okay, and what is a cell wall made up of? Cellulose, hemicellulose, and pectin. And the cell wall has a thickenings, angular thickenings. They are usually present in the angular thickenings. Now, the cells which is containing the chloroplast, we usually call it as your chlorenchyma. What do we call them as? We call them as your chlorenchyma. Okay, and as I said you, intercellular spaces are absent and there is a mechanical support which provides a mechanical support. Ma'am, heg ma'am mechanical support kodutte andre, see, if this is your stem, okay, if this is your stem, you will have your leaf arising, correct? Your leaf will have a stalk over here, correct? So leaf means your petiole will be having your chlorenchyma present. Am I clear to you? So that it will help it to preventing from drooping down, from falling off. Moving on to the next particular thing is your sclerenchyma. Endra sclerenchyma. Children, this is a dead tissues, okay? And they are usually long, narrow, with thickened and lignified walls. So main thing is the cell wall is made up of what, makle? Lignin, okay? And the cell wall has numerous of the pits. Now they will have a particular pits present. Ma'am, ಏನು pits andre? Makle, in the pits you will not have any of the particular, the cell wall depositions. Okay. Now those things are called as what, makle? They are called as your pits. Okay. And they are dead without protoplast. Mean to say there will be no protoplast present. See, in the sclerenchyma, you have two types. The first one you will be speaking is your fibers. Okay. Now, children, fibers are elongated and pointed cells. Okay. See, this is your pointed part. Okay. And inside, you will have a particular cavity present. What you will have, children? You will have your cavity present, and that's nothing but your lumen. Am I clear to you? What is it, children? It's nothing but your lumen. Okay. Now, the entire cell will have a cell wall which is completely thick. This is the place where your particularly lignin is present. You will have your lignin present. Am I clear to you? So, this is how the entire structure of the fiber will be. And if at all you look at the diagram, you could have found this particular space over here. This is what is your pits is. That's what I said you. These are the place where there is no cell wall deposition. So those are called as what, makla? They are called as your pits. Moving ahead, makla, next one is your under sclerenchyma. The first one was your fiber, and the second one in makla, they are nothing but your particularly the sclerides. Okay. Now, sclerides, unlike your particular fibers, they are spherical, oval, and cylindrical. Fiber hegittu makla, they are like elongated structures. Sclerides henge makla, they are spherical, oval, and cylindrical. Okay. And they are usually the dead cells with narrow cavities called as a lumen. Now, the fruit wall of the nuts, they are usually, where and all these particular things, sclerides are present. Neet nodra, they are usually present in the fruit walls of the nuts, pulp of the fruits, seed coat of the legumes, and the leaves of the tree. Okay. Now, when I say about that, especially the fruit walls of the particular nuts like walnut, ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಯೂಶುವಲಿ ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ ಸ್ಕ್ಲೆರೈಡ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಕಣ್ರೋ ಓಕೆನಾ ಪಲ್ಪ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಫ್ರೂಟ್ಸ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಗ್ವಾವಾ ಸೀಬೆಕಾಯಿ ಓಕೆ ಸೊ ಸೀಬೆಕಾಯಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಯೂಶುವಲಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಪಲ್ಪ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಫ್ರೂಟ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ನಿಮಗೆ ಸ್ಕ್ಲೆರೆನ್ಕೈಮಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಸೀಡ್ ಕೋಟ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಲೆಗ್ಯೂಮ್ಸ್ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಆಲ್ ದ ಸೀಡ್ ಕೋಟ್ಸ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಸ್ಕ್ಲೆರೈಡ್ಸ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ and the leaves of the tea particular plant. Now what is their main function is nothing but your mechanical support. What do they provide? Mechanical support. Now moving ahead makla, what is it? Look at this particular thing. This is how your sclerides are, polygonal or spherical in particular shape. Now can you see the spots in middle? Now these are nothing but your lumen. Enanta kariತೀವಿ ನಾವು lumen. Now can you see this black spots over here? Now those are nothing but your pits. What are they? They are nothing but your pits. Microscopic view though. Now see these things. Can you see? These are the places where there is a pits present. Okay. Now these are nothing but the thickened cell walls. Which are the ones? These ones. They are nothing but your thick cell wall. Okay. And next one. In the center, there is a cavity called as your lumen. What is it, children? There's a cavity called as your lumen. Moving ahead. See, this is how it exactly looks like in the particular microscopic view. Okay, see, in the center you can see the lumens present. Next, moving ahead, complex tissues. Complex tissues. Okay, now what is it? It is made up of more than one type of the cells. Permanent tissues, it was made up of single type of the cells. Complex, they are made up of your more than one type of the cells. Now example is your xylem and your phloem. Xylem and your particular phloem. Now we will study in detail with each one. Now coming to your xylems, children, they are usually a conducting tissue for water, minerals, okay, and also a roots to the stem and the leaves. Now coming back to the point, there are four different kinds of elements. Yeah, we have the tracheids, vessels, xylem fibers and xylem parenchyma. Okay, amale questions keltare makla. Xylem is the one which will help in the conduction of water dissolved where the minerals are there. Only water will be given. ಬರೀ ಒಂದು ವಾಟರ್ ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ತಾನೆ, ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ ಮಕ್ಳೆ? ಇಲ್ವಾ ವಾಟರ್ ವೇರ್ ದ ಮಿನರಲ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಡಿಸಾಲ್ವ್ಡ್ ಅಂತಾನು ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ಮಕ್ಳೆ, ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ ಮಕ್ಳೆ? ಸೊ ಆಲ್ವೇಸ್ ಚೂಸ್ ದ ವಾಟರ್ ವೇರ್ ದ ಮಿನರಲ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಡಿಸಾಲ್ವ್ಡ್. ಆಯ್ತೇನ್ರೋ? ನಾ ಮೂವಿಂಗ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಟು ದ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್, xylem as I told you there are four types ಮಕ್ಳೆ. ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ್ದು ಕಂಡ್ರೋ? tracheids, vessels, xylem fibers and xylem parenchyma. Now the first one is your tracheids. Now children, if at all you look at the particular diagram, makla, it is very much elongated. What is it, children? It is very elongated. Not only that, they are all dead cells. Makla, they are all dead cells. Of course, they have a thick and a lignified walls and the tapering ends. This is the tapering end. Okay, and usually the protoplasm is absent. Okay children, usually what makla? Protoplasm absent. Usually cells satogidre, if the cell is dead, usually the protoplasm will not be there and they'll have a numerous pits present. Okay, now depending upon the pits, okay, depending on how it is exactly deposited, there are different types. Children, if they are in a circular form, they are called as your annular. If at all they are in a spiral form like this, they are called as your spiral. Now if at all they are in a ladder form like this, ladder agirutte, okay na, adana enanta karitivi, we call it as scalary form. What do we call it as makla? Scalary form. If at all they are in a network kind like this, see, there will be in a network form like this. Okay, now we call it as your reticulate. If at all they are just having a circle kind, we call it as pitted. If a circle is surrounded by border, we call it as bordered pitted. Okay, so basically these are the different kinds of your particular pits which is present. Yeah, we have the makla annular, spiral, scalariform, reticulate, pitted and your border pitted. Moving on to the next one makla, inner layers of the cell walls have thickened way which varies from andre idunu same makla, but idu actually spiral or annular alla, okay na, and this is actually spiral, helical also we can call. Okay, this is how it looks. Now after your tracheids, we have the next one forming your vessels. Now children, your tracheids are elongated structures, okay, with our tapering ends, whereas your vessels, they are usually your cylindrical shape. In shape makla cylindrical shape. Okay, and of course here you can find this is your annular and this is your spiral particular pits. Okay, now coming back to over here, it is usually long cylindrical tube like, made up of many cells. Protoplasm absent. Protoplasm absent andre eno, they are nothing but your dead cells. And now what I want you to remember is, gymnosperms do not have vessels. Keep it in your mind. Okay, gymnosperms ge vessels iralla. So keep this in your mind. Gymnosperms lack vessels, but it is one of the major characteristic of your angiosperms. So your angiosperms contains what makla? They do contain your particular vessels. Moving on to the next one is your xylem fibers. Okay, first one tracheids zone, next one vessel zone, the next one is in makla xylem fibers. Now coming to your xylem fibers, again children, they are also elongated just like your fibers only. Okay, they are also dead. Okay, but there are different two types. What is it? Can you see these lines over here? ಈ ರೀತಿ ಸೆಪ್ಟಾ ಬಂದಿರುತ್ತೆ ಇದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ. Okay na? So these are all your septate, whereas this is your aseptate. Okay, there are two types. They have a highly thickened cell walls, central lumen is present. Okay, and they are septate or aseptate. There are two particular types, septate or aseptate. Moving on to the next one is makla xylem parenchyma. End on next the xylem parenchyma. Okay na? Now tracheids odudri, vessels odudri, xylem fibers and xylem parenchyma is the next one. Now coming to your xylem parenchyma. Children, this is the only one living cell in the xylem. Talalitkoli, complete nalakalli. Xylem tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma and xylem fibers. The only living tissue which is present is xylem parenchyma. Okay. Now, they are usually living and thin-walled cells with cellulosic cell wall. Whatever the parenchyma does the function, the same thing even xylem parenchyma does. They store the food and other substances like your tannins. Okay. They usually store the food. Okay, children. So, this is exactly how, this is your parenchyma. This is your xylem parenchyma. These are the things. Moving ahead. See? Tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma. Am I clear to you? These are the three things. And another one is what? Xylem fibers. Okay, makla? Moving ahead. Idu nodra. Same thing. Tracheids, they'll be usually thinner. Usually. Vessels will be larger in diameter compared to your tracheids. And this is nothing but you particularly see. You can see these cells over here in the center. This is nothing but your xylem parenchyma. Okay, that's your xylem parenchyma. Okay, makla? Moving ahead. If this is your xylem parenchyma, see over here, this is nothing but your xylem fibers. Now, this is where your particular vessels are located and this is where the tracheids. Usually we will ask you to write phloem diagram, alva makla? But idral nodi, this part so much is what? Is nothing but your tracheids. Okay, now right next to that, what do you have? Xylem vessels. Correct? Okay. Now, right next to that, what do you have? You have something called as your particularly xylem. And the last one is nothing but your xylem parenchyma. Enu makla? The last, this part. This is nothing but your xylem parenchyma. Okay. So, these are the particular structures which is present. This is how it looks. If I take a longitudinal section, your vascular bundles look like this. Now, usually, particularly your xylems, okay, the protoxylem and your metaxylem, okay. So, your protoxylem, if at all, okay, the protoxylem is facing towards inside. Okay, we call it as your end arc. What do we call it as? End arc. Okay. Now, if at all, if they are facing outside, we call it as your exarch. Wait a second. See, this is exarch. This is your exarch condition. Okay, and this is your end arc condition. Okay, see, protoxylem is facing towards the pith. What is it, children? The protoxylem is facing towards the pith. You usually call it as what, makla? You call it as your end arc condition. Okay. Now, when we speak about end arc and exarch, that's what I said you. Protoxylem facing towards the pith is end arc. Protoxylem towards the periphery is exarch. Okay. And opposite will be vice versa with your metaxylem. Okay. Moving ahead. Protoxylem andrenu ma'am, metaxylem andrenu. Protoxylems, these are nothing but your early formed vessels. ಏನು ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಇವೆಲ್ಲ early formed vessels. Now the one which is formed later is called as your metaxylem. Now in protoxylem the lumen will be usually narrow, in this it will be usually wider. Okay, and these usually exhibit annular and spiral pits, whereas these things will form scalary and reticulate. Ashte eno early formed and the protoxylem narrow lumen, and particularly narrow lumen irutte, innondu en makla they have a particular annular and spiral thickenings. Okay na makla, in metaxylem what is there, it is usually formed later, lumen is wider, scalary form and your reticulate form of the particular thickenings. Now, moving on to the next particular thing is children, phloem. Phloem. Now, coming to the phloem. Sweethearts, usually the phloem will be helping in the transportation of the particular food. What do they help in, children? They help in the transportation of the food materials from leaf to the different plant parts. Okay. And what are they composed of? They are composed of your seed tube elements, companion cells, phloem parenchyma and phloem fibers. ಏನೇನಿರುತ್ತೆ ಕಂಡ್ರೋ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ? You have seed tube elements, companion cells, phloem parenchyma and phloem fibers. So these are the different kinds of the components present in your phloem. ಆಯ್ತಾ? Moving ahead. The first one is what makla? Sieve tube elements. Enu makla? Sieve tube elements. Now children, under your sieve tube elements, what is it? They have a long tube like cells. Sieve tubes, they are usually long tube. Long ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ tube, okay na? And they are arranged longitudinally. Of course, they are usually arranged very longitudinally, means one above the other like this. Okay, and end walls are usually having perforations. Like this, you will have perforations. Since it appears like a sieve, we call it as your sieve plate. What do we call this as? We call it as your sieve plates. Okay, and they're having a cytoplasm and a large vacuole without nucleus. Makla, keep it in the mind. They have cytoplasm andrenu, they are living cells, but they don't have a nucleus. Yake ma'am nucleus illa ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಆಮೇಲೆ. Okay, because the nucleus illa ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಇಲ್ಲ sieve tubes ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ there is another cell which is controlling it. Okay, I'm sure you will be knowing about this now. What is it? It's nothing but your companion cells. Okay, so the companion cell nucleus will control the activity of the sieve tube. Am I clear to you? So the functions are usually controlled by the nucleus of the companion cells. Am I clear to? Actional neevidira nimminda beroru idare controlling. So that's the same thing over here in the sieve tubes. Moving ahead, the next one is your companion cells. What is it, children? Companion cells. So they are the specialized parenchymatous cells. Sieve tube elements and the companion cells are connected through the pit fields. They help in maintaining pressure gradient in the sieve tubes. Adanne nanu heliddu, companion cells ಏನು ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ? It is actually controlling your sieve tubes. What is it actually doing? It is controlling the sieve tubes. See, children, here what you have is sieve tube. Okay, here what you have is nothing but your sieve plate. This is nothing but your companion cells. Okay, so that's your companion cells. So this is the same thing, xylem ಮತ್ತೆ ಇದು phloem. Okay na makla, from here to here you have your xylem, from here to you have a phloem. Now here you have a meristematic cells present. All these are your meristematic cells. Now these meristematic cells in the vascular bundle, we usually call it as your cambium. Okay, so xylem, phloem and your cambium. And you know, if at all the cambium is there, we call it as a open type, which I'll be dealing little later. Now phloem parenchyma. Now coming to your phloem parenchyma, they are usually elongated tapering cylindrical cells. What are they usually called as? Elongated tapering and your cylindrical cells. They have dense cytoplasm and nucleus. So moral of the story, again, these are the living cells. En makla avivella no, these are nothing but your living cells. Okay, now the cellulose has a pitch through which plasmodesmatal connection exhibits between the cells. Okay, so what is there? Here one cell, here one cell. So usually these two cells are connected by plasmodesmatal connections. Okay, now the stored food and other resins, latex and mucilage. Makla same thing kandro, parenchyma en martidyo, phloem parenchyma no ade madutte kandro, store food, resins, latex, mucilage idella madutte. Okay na, and it is absent in your monocotyledons. Where is it absent in? They are usually absent in your monocotyledons. Moving ahead, See children, this is the diagrammatic representation. This is sieve plate, this is your sieve tube, okay, and this over here is called as companion cells. This is your parenchymatous. Ma'am, ಎರಡು ಪಿಂಕ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಹೆಂಗ್ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ ನೋಡಿ, ಇದು ದೊಡ್ಡದಾಗಿದೆ ಸೆಪ್ಟಾ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್, ಬಟ್ ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಹಂಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಚಿಕ್ಕದಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ಸ್ ಹೌ ವಿ ಯೂಶಲಿ ಡಿಫ್ರೆನ್ಶಿಯೇಟ್ ಬಿಟ್ವೀನ್ ಟು. Now moving ahead, the next one is your phloem fibers. Enu makle, the next one are phloem fibers. Now coming to your phloem fibers, okay, they are usually called as your sclerenchymatous cells. What do we call it as? Sclerenchymatous cells. And they are usually absent in the primary phloem. So the primary phloem will not have your phloem fibers, okay, and they are elongated, unbranched, having a pointed needle-like apices. ಫೈಬರ್ಸ್ ಹೇಗಿರುತ್ತೋ ಫೈಬರ್ ಜೊತೆ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಫ್ಲೋಯಮು ಹಾಗೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಓಕೆ, ಅಂಡ್ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಎ ಥಿಕ್ ಸೆಲ್ ವಾಲ್. And at maturity, fibers lost their protoplasm. Moral of the story, phloem fibers is the only one dead cell present in the phloem. Unlike in your particular xylem, what is it? It's only your xylem parenchyma is a living cell which is present. The phloem allenagide makle, it is your phloem fibers is the only one which is a dead cell. So usually phloem fibers are used in your jute, flax, hemp. They are used in the commercial purpose. Phloem fibers are very important in your commercial purpose, like all this ರೋಪ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಆಯ್ತಾ. ಸೊ ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಫ್ಲೋಯಮ್ ಫೈಬರ್ಸ್ಗಳೇ, ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆಯೇನ್ರೋ. ಸೊ ಮ್ಯಾನುಫ್ಯಾಕ್ಚರಿಂಗ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಟೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಇಂಡಸ್ಟ್ರೀಸು ಎಲ್ಲ ಬ್ಯಾಗ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ, ಆಲ್ ದೋಸ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್, ಜೂಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ, ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ಬಟ್ ಯುವರ್ ಹೆಂಪ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇರ್ತಾವಲ್ಲ, ಅವೆಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಫ್ಲೋಯಮ್ ಫೈಬರ್ಸೇ. Now phloem is also two type, protophlloem and metaphlloem. Protophlloem, they have a narrow lumen. Metaphlloem, they have a larger lumen. Now the tissue system, now based on a structure and the location wherever they are present, we classify them into following types, okay. What are those? Epidermal tissue system, ground tissue system, vascular tissue system. Yenendra epidermal, ground and your vascular tissue system, okay. And one more thing which I would like to say, I'm just putting up a point over here. Phloem na usually na blast anta kariತೀವಿ, ಓಕೆನಾ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬ್ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಫೈಬರ್ಸ್. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ xylem ನ ನಾವು ವುಡ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ತಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ಇದನ್ನ. Now moving ahead, the first one is epidermal. ಏನ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ವಿ ಇವಾಗ? ಟಿಶ್ಯೂ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್, 3 types, epidermal, ground, vascular. So among that, the first one we have started with what makla? Epidermal, okay. Now in the epidermal, it forms the outermost covering. Usually the epidermal cells will be the first layer. Am I clear to what it will be, children? It will be the first layer, okay. Now on your epidermis, okay, you can have different types present. Usually on your epidermis you will have certain structures like this. What are these? These are nothing but your stomata. Am I clear to? Stomata irutte. Also you will have certain extensions like this. If it is a root, you will have a root hair. Root hair is unicellular. If it is a leaf, you will have your trichomes present. Trichomes are usually unicellular or multicellular, okay. Unicellular agu irutte, multicellular agu irutte, okay na. So these are the particular things which is present in your epidermal cells. What are those? See, it is the outermost covering of the plant, comprises of epidermal cells, stomata, epidermal appendages. Enenide makle adrallunu? Epidermal cells, stomata and epidermal appendages, okay. So the first one we'll be speaking about your epidermal cells. Outermost layer, elongated, compactly arranged, forms a continuous layer. So this is the layer, outermost layer which is continuous. Makle, you should also know that these things will have a particular covering on them. What is it called as? Cuticle. What is it called as, makle? They are usually called as your cuticle present on them, which is a waxy layer which prevents it from the transpiration. So that is about your particular epidermis. Moving ahead, children, outside of the epidermis is covered by, adanne nanu nimge helidu, it is covered by a thick waxy layer called as cuticle, absent in the roots. Eno absent? Cuticle is absent in the roots. Am I clear to you? So this is your particularly epidermal region. What is this, children? This is nothing but your epidermal region. Am I clear to you? Now usually in epidermis ಏನಿರಲ್ಲ cuticle ಇರಲ್ಲ, but they have root hair present. Okay, moving ahead, see children, the next one is your stomata. Endra, the next one endra, stomata. Okay, now coming to your stomata, usually present in the epidermis of the leaves. They regulate the transpiration and exchange of the gases. Of course, see, usually your stomata, you have your guard cells present. Okay, so whenever the guard cells are turgid in condition, whenever the guard cells are turgid in condition, the stomata opens and there is an exchange of the water and the oxygen. What exchange is there? There is an exchange of the water and then gas present. Carbon dioxide agirbodu, oxygen agirbodu. Okay na? Now, what are these cells which is present outside? These are called as your subsidiary cells. What are they called as? Subsidiary cells. Now, darlings, this is your dicot stomata and this is your monocot stomata. How do you differentiate? This is usually kidney shaped, which one your dicot, whereas your monocot will be usually your dumbbell shapes. Okay, so that's the difference between both. See, this is your monocot, okay makla, whereas this is your dicot. Okay na makla, what is it? This is usually your dicot. I repeat again, this is usually your dicot. Am I clear to you? So this is your dicot and this is your monocot. Okay, now coming back to the point. Not really. Epidermal appendages, there are two types, hairs and your trichomes. Avagla helidve makla, hair yadralli irutte kandra, usually it is present in your root. In trichomes elli irutte makla, usually it will be present in your leaf. So root hairs are unicellular elongated structures, whereas trichomes, these are multicellular. Okay na, usually root hair hingirutte makla. Okay na, trichomes hengiruttro hingirutte. Okay, they are usually a multicellular structures. Sometimes trichomes will secrete certain substances which will be poisonous too. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕ ಪಕ್ಕಿದ ಗಿಡನೆಲ್ಲ ಮುಟ್ಟಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಬೇಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋದು. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ? ಹಾ. Moving on to the next particular thing, ground tissue system, which is the next one, children, ground tissue system. Now children, usually your ground tissue system will be comprising of your parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, and usually these particular things will be present in your mesophyll region. Ma'am, mesophyll andre eno? I'm sure you would have seen in your particular leaf, you have upper epidermis and your lower epidermis. Yes or no? So between these two, you will have your cells present like this. Yes, now this region is your mesophyll, which comprises of your ground tissue. Also cortex. Cortex kuda nimge ground tissue system ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. Am I clear to you? So all these comprises of your ground tissue system. Moving ahead, vascular tissue system, makla, usually it is nothing but your xylem and the phloem. Enu makla, xylem and the phloem, there are two types, radial and conjoint. Enu makla, radial and conjoint. Okay, now moving ahead makla, see over here, what do I mean by radial? Radial means, children, this is how they will be. Okay, this is your xylem, this is your phloem. They are alternating each other, but they are on the same radius. See, of course you have a difference with the diameters, radius length. Okay, but they are usually present on the same plane. Okay, whereas when I say conjoint, they are opposite to each other. See, they are opposite to each other like this. Am I clear to you? Now again, in the vascular system you have two types. One is called as your open system. Enu makla, open. Another one is what makla, closed. Now why do we call it as open or closed? Makla, whenever I say open, there is a presence of a cambium. Whenever I say closed, there is no cambium present. Okay, so these are the types of your particular vascular tissues. Moving ahead makla, the starting with your particular anatomy. Okay, the first one is your dicotyledonous stem. Enu makla, dicotyledonous stem. Okay, now coming to your dicotyledonous, please look at the particular diagram very clearly. First layer is epidermis. Avagla helide napka and raw. Hypodermis is having collenchyma. Right below collenchyma, you have parenchyma present. Okay, so this is collenchyma and parenchyma. Am I clear to you? So both the part will form your hypodermis, followed by a layer of your particular endodermis. Endodermis is the innermost layer of the cortex. ಮತ್ತೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದೀನಿ, what is endodermis? It is the innermost layer of the cortex. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ? Next, followed by many layers of your pericycle, where you have your phloem and xylem. These are all your xylems. Okay, these are all your xylems, phloem and xylem. So oppositally there. So what is it? They are usually conjoined. Am I clear to you? And they have something present in the middle. What is it? Cambium. And protoxylem is facing towards the pith. So it is your particularly endarca, exarca. It is nothing but your endarc. Aita makla? And remember always, makla, one more thing. What is it? Endarc condition, okay, will always be present in the stem. Exarc condition will always be present in the root. Idun talal itkondirbeku. See, epidermis, they usually have a cuticle, trichome and the stomata present. Okay, so the cortex is divided into many regions. You have the hypodermal region and the cortical layers. So endodermis is rich in the starch grains. Okay, idal endodermis nodudralla makla. You saw endodermis over here. Okay, so usually the ಏನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, see, if I write ಇದು epidermis ಅಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ಬರೀತಿರೋದು endodermis. Endodermis ಗೆ ಏನಾಗಿರುತ್ತಪ್ಪ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ, they usually have your starch grains present. What do they have? Starch grains like this. Okay, they'll have a starch grains present. Okay makla, so moving ahead, since they have a starch grain present, okay, so they are called as your starch sheath. What do we call it as? Starch sheath. Pericycle is semilunar, which is sclerenchymatous, and the pericycle is made up of sclerenchyma. They have medullary particular race, vascular bundle is conjoined, open and endarc. Of course the pith is also present. The same thing, whatever I told, but just keep this in your mind. Conjoined, collateral, open. Okay, bundle sheath is absent. Vessels are arranged in a rows. Water cavity is absent. Okay, whereas the innermost layer is nothing but your endodermis. So keep all these things in your point. And remember the main thing in dicotyledonous stem, hypodermis is nothing but your cholenchymatous. Another, usually it is cholenchymatous. Now, moving on to the next one is your monocotyledonous stem. Enu makla? Monocotyledonous stem. So the outermost layer is epidermis followed by hypodermis. They have your vascular bundles present. Okay, where your phloem is completely surrounding your xylem, and all these things are nothing but your ground tissues. These are nothing but your ground tissues. Illella pink green ideyala makla, avella nimma ground tissues. Okay, now sclerenchymatous hypodermis. Monocot stem ಏನಾಗಿತ್ತು? Monocot stem ಏನಾಗಿತ್ತು? Cholenchymatous hypodermis. Dicot stem ಏನಾಗಿತ್ತು? Cholenchymatous hypodermis. Whereas monocot stem ಏನಾಗಿದೆ? Sclerenchymatous hypodermis. They have a scattered vascular bundle, whereas in a dicot the vascular bundles are usually ring form. Okay, so they are surrounded by the bundle sheath. Vascular bundles are conjoined, closed. Closed means they don't have a cambium present. Okay, so the peripheral vascular bundle are smaller than the central. Phloem parenchymata is absent. Okay, and water contained cavity is present in the vascular bundle. Moving on to the next one, see the same thing. Okay, what is it? Epidermis is single layer, no epidermal hairs. Hypodermis is sclerenchymatous. Vascular bundle ಏನಾಗಿದೆ? Scattered ಆಗೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ. Okay, vascular bundles are periphery, smaller in size. ಏನ್ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್ ಹಿಂಗಂದ್ರೆ, see over here, ಇಲ್ಲಿರೋ ವ್ಯಾಸ್ಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಬಂಡಲ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಚಿಕ್ಕದಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಸೆಂಟರ್ಗೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಬರ್ತಾ ದೊಡ್ಡದಾಗುತ್ತೆ. Am I clear to you? So peripheral iro vascular bundles ಎಲ್ಲ small, ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ large. The vascular bundles are conjoined, collateral and closed. Okay, and the sclerenchymatous bundle sheath is present. They have a sclerenchymatous bundle sheath. Now vessels are arranged in V or the Y shape, and only ground tissue is present. This is the difference between a monocot and a dicot. ಏನು ನೋಡಿ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಚಿಕ್ಕದಾಗಿದೆ ಕಣ್ರೋ, ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಎಲ್ಲ ದೊಡ್ಡದಾಗ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಓಕೆನಾ? This is monocot stem which is scattered. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ring form. Dicot stem. Now, moving on to the next one is your dorsiventral leaf. Okay, now that's nothing but your dicot leaf. Here it majorly shows you three layers. You have the epidermis, mesophyll, vascular bundle. So all these are your three major parts. Okay, moving on to the first one, see over the diagram, children. Usually it has your upper epidermis and the lower epidermis. What it has? Upper epidermis and lower epidermis. Upper epidermis is called as your adaxial epidermis. Lower epidermis is called as your abaxial epidermis. Now, usually the stomata is more concentrated on your lower epidermis. Okay, usually it is more concentrated where, children? It is more concentrated on your lower epidermis. Okay, now see, these are the stomata. Now, stomata will have a cavity present. It is called as a substomatal cavity. Now, moving ahead, in the center, you have completely the layer of mesophyll layer. What layer, children? Mesophyll layer. Mesophyll layer has been divided into two particular type of cells. One is your elongated cell, another one is your spherical cells. Okay, so these cells are called as what, makle? Palisade parenchyma. These are called as your spongy parenchyma. Okay, these are your spongy parenchyma. Of course, both of them has your particular chloroplast present. Okay, now can you see this region, these cells? This is nothing but your bundle sheath cells. Enanta ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ? Bundle sheath cells. And of course, you have your endodermis present, and where you have your phloem and your xylem located. Okay, so this is your particularly dicot particular cells. Same thing I have told. What is it? Epidermis has both the layers, upper epidermis, lower epidermis. Okay, so stomata is more on your lower epidermis. ನೀವು ನೋಡಬಹುದು ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಸ್ಟೊಮ್ಯಾಟಲ್ ಪೋಸ್. ಓಕೆನಾ? Now, moving ahead, mesophyll layer are of two types, palisade parenchyma and spongy parenchyma. Okay, and in between them they will have a space present called as air cavities, which helps in a buoyancy. Same thing I have told you. See, children, they have palisade and your spongy parenchyma, and spongy parenchyma has what? They have a large spaces, and abundant chloroplast is present in your palisade parenchyma. Now, these are the air spaces. Now, children, usually xylem cells, they are usually angular, red stained. Ivella in particular xylem illirodu. Okay na? Phloem cells, they are usually thin walled. Now, bundle sheath cells, they are thin walled. Parenchymatous radiate and form the veins. Moving on to the next one is your monocotyledonous leaf. We also call it as your isobilateral leaf. Dicot leaf ಏನಂತ ಕರೆದ್ವಿ, dorsiventral leaf ಅಂತ ಕರೆದ್ವಿ. Monocot leaf ಏನಂತ ಕರಿತಿದೀವಿ, isobilateral leaf ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. There are three main parts: epidermis, mesophyll and the vascular system. Same thing. Okay, moving ahead. See, this is your particularly monocot leaf. Okay, now in the monocot leaf, what happens? You are mesophyll layer. Same thing, they have upper epidermis and the lower epidermis, but the mesophyll layer is not differentiated into palisade or spongy. And of course, they all have a particular, what to say, the chloroplast present. And here, whatever you are seeing is nothing but your particularly what, makla? Your bundle sheath. Enu makla? Bundle sheath. And this is nothing but your xylems located. Okay, surroundingly you have your particular phloem present. All these are your particular phloem present. Am I clear to you? And children, if at all you look, the stomata is equally distributed on both the surface. Hence, we call it as amphistomatic. Okay, what is it? Stomata is distributed equally on both the surface. Hence, we call it as your amphistomatic. Okay, now moving ahead, children, the next important point. What is it? Maklam, usually, okay, here they have not given, but I'll just write for you. Usually, your mesophyll cells will have a larger cell like this. I'll write over here. A larger cell, okay, the larger cell like this. Now, these cells are called as bulliform cells. What are they called as? Bulliform cells, also called as your mota cells. Yenike idu important makla? Whenever there is no particular water present, okay, whenever there is no water present, immediately what happens? The leaf will curl like this. Why? In order to prevent your transpiration, to prevent the excess of transpiration. Am I clear to you? So what happens? The leaf will curl. Am I clear to you? So whenever there is enough of water, it will expose this area like this. Am I clear to you? So that is the reason your bulliform cells are there. Your bulliform cells are also called as mota cells. Okay, moving ahead. Same thing, whatever I've told. Okay, so bulliform cells, when turgid, it is surface is export flaccid, it will curl inward. Remember that. Same thing, the few things which I would like to know, which you have to remember: dorsiventral leaf anta karitivi, yadana? Dicot leaf na. hypostomatic, motor cells are absent, mesophyll is differentiated, veins is not very important but still remember it, okay. Xylem vessels, protoxylem and metaxylem are in each bundles made up of collenchyma, okay. Whereas monocot leaf typically isobilateral, amphistomatic, upper epidermis, okay. Motor cells are present in the upper epidermis, undifferentiated mesophyll cells, parallel venation, okay. And protoxylem, metaxylem in each bundle, it's not that very important, but this sheet is very important. What is it? Your bundle sheath extensions are made up of sclerenchyma. Idallu bundle sheath ittu, it is made up of collenchyma. Adan talali itಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. Dicot leaf ಅಲ್ಲಿ bundle sheath collenchymaದಲ್ಲಿದ್ರೆ monocot ಅಲ್ಲಿ sclerenchymaದಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. Now moving on to the root system, okay. Now children, the root is nothing, the root alli ನಾವು epidermis na we call it as your epiblema. What do we call it as, children? We call it as your epiblema, okay. Now the epiblema will have your root hair extension, and of course it's followed by a parenchymatous cortex. This region is called as your endodermis, okay, followed by your pericycle. Then they have your particular phloem alternating with your xylem, and see children, protoxylem is towards our periphery, okay. So this is your exact condition. Same thing it is, children. But what I want you to remember is vascular bundles will usually be, okay, in the particular, see children, in this particular diagram you have many vascular bundles, correct. So we call this as your polyarc condition. What do we call it as? Polyarc condition. This I want you to remember. Now in the dicot root it is different. In dicot root, see, you just have 4, rest all is same, but the vascular bundle is only different. So here we call it as your tetra condition because it is only 4 vascular bundles present. Same thing rest. Now coming to your secondary growth, children, in the secondary growth, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ರೋ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ diagram ನೋಡ್ರೋ, usually initial ಆಗಿ ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ, you will have your particular outside you will have your phloem, inside you will have your xylem. Sometimes what will happen, there will be a meristematic tissue which will be formed. So meristematic tissue will cut the particular cells towards the either side, okay. So what you will form now, see over here, center what you had your cambium present, correct. You had what, makla, cambium present. Now here this is your primary phloem, here you will have your secondary phloem, okay. Whereas over here what you had, children, from that time what you had, children, you had your particular primary xylem, and this will be your secondary xylem. So this is how it will be formed. Same thing diagram, okay. This is your vascular bundles where your secondary, primary xylem, cambial ring is all formed. Now the cambium which is formed in between the cells, we call it as interfascicular. If it is inside, we call it as intrafascicular. Idu inter ade, idu intrafascicular anta kariತೀವಿ. Am I clear to you? These are the two particular cambium which will completely form your cambial ring. This complete ring is called as your cambial ring. Moving on to the next one, springwood and the autumnwood. Springwood we usually call it as the early wood, formed during the spring season, okay. It constitutes major of the annual ring. Andre springwood and the autumnwood together forms your one annual ring, okay. And the counting of the age of the tree we usually call it as what, dendrochronology, okay. So it forms plenty of xylem vessels with wider cavities, and there are a few number of xylem numbers. The wood is lighter in color, whereas in autumn it is darker in color. So here it is usually formed late winter seasonal form agirutte. Narrow will be usually present, okay. The region will be very narrow. Autumnwood is present in the annual ring, so the cavities of the xylem vessels are usually narrower. Adu wider, idu narrower. Adan taleli itkolra. See, can you see this dark color? This is nothing but your autumnwood. In between what you're finding here, this is nothing but your springwood. Same thing. Now sapwood and heartwood, this region is usually lighter and living, and this region is usually darker and it is dead. Now this region will never be attacked by your particular microorganism, and usually it is used for your economical purpose. Yavado heartwood. Am I clear to you? So heartwood is the one which will be used for your economical purpose, not the sapwood. Same thing. See over here, children, the heartwood and the sapwood, and whatever you're finding outside is nothing but your bark. Bark, anything which is from secondary phloem is nothing but your bark. Okay. Now heartwood is called as duramen. Remember that. Okay, heartwood is called as duramen. The rest all is the same, and there's usually, if they are dark in color, why? They have tannins, resins, and the gums present, and they are mechanically very strong. Okay, whereas your sapwood, it is called as albumen. Okay, children, and they are usually living. Now, usually, children, your phloem, corcambium, and phloem together, they usually all form called as your peridome. So remember that. Idin nodi. Cork is called as phloem, corcambium is called as phloem, secondary cortex is called as phloem. Together, all the three will form what? Peridome. What do they form? They form something called as your peridome. Okay, same thing. So what is a bark? The anything with particular living phloem, corcambium together, we call it as what, children? We call it as a bark. Okay. Now moving on to the next one is your lenticel. See, children, you have a pore present. This is called as your lenticel pore. Okay, and you have all the loose cells surrounding your lenticels. And of course, this is nothing but your cork region. So phloem, all these things are present over here. Okay, so sometimes you will have a pores present. Okay, now those usually help in the exchange of the gases. Those are called as your lenticels. See, those are the pores. Those are called as your lenticels. See, children, you could have seen these things. These are all your lenticels. These are all the pores which are present called as your lenticels. Okay. Now there is something called as a secondary growth in dicot root, but it is very much abnormal. They are in a wavy shape. Okay. So irregular formation of the secondary growth it is in the root system. Now, let's start off with the particular MCQs. The first question. Read the following statement regarding the meristematic cells and select the correct ones. Am I clear to you? Now, the cells possess, correct statement called Romakla. Cell possesses the ability to grow and divide. Cell have dense cytoplasm with the prominent nucleus, well-developed ER and a mitochondria are present. Select the correct statement. Select the correct statement. Reply madro bega. Read the question properly and see the particular answer. ಎ ಜೆ ಏನೋ ಅದು ಸಂದಿತಾ ಎ ಓ ರಾಕಿ ಬಾಯ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ಯಾನ ಮತ್ತೆ ದಾಕ್ಷಾಯಿಣಿ ಎ ಗುಡ್ ಕಣ ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿ ಗುಡ್ ಗುಡ್ ಪೂಜಾ ಏನಮ್ಮ ಅದು ಗುಂಡು ಗುರ್ತಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಕ್ಳ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಕಣ್ರೋ ಸೂಪರ್ ನಿಸರ್ಗ ವಿಜಯಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿ ಪೂಜಾ ಅಕ್ಷತಾ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಮನೋಜ್ super super makla very good makla. So the option is A. En makla the correct statement is cell possesses the ability to grow and divide. Cell has a dense cytoplasm with the prominent nucleus. These are the two particular answer. Well developed ER and mitochondria are present. They are actually absent, so it is not present. Moving on to the next question. Column 1 with column 2. Choose the proper answer. Choose the proper answer. Column 1 with column 2. Bega madra. Meristem andre eno. Kirti B. Excellent ma. Super ma ನೀನು. SC ಏನಮ್ಮ ಅದು 2 ಅಂತ ಬರ್ದಿದ್ಯಾ. ವಿದ್ಯಾವತ್ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ನಿತ್ಯ ಪಿಂಕಿ ಹೊಸ ಹೊಸ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳೆಲ್ಲ ಬಂದವ್ರು ಇವತ್ತು ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೂಪರ್ ಅಪ್ಪು ನೋಡೋ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನೋಡೋ ಬಯಾಲಜಿ ಅಂತ ಹಾಕೋಣವನೆ ನೋಡೋ ಎಂಥ ಮಕ್ಳು ನೋಡ್ರು ಸೂಪರ್ ಅವ್ನು ಯಾರೋ ಅವ್ನು ಕೊರೋನಾ ವೈರಸ್ ಸಾಲದು ಅಂತ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇರೆ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀನಲ್ಲ ನೀನು ಕೊರೋನಾ ವೈರಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಮಾ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಸೂಪರ್ ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಕ್ಳೆ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್. Okay, so the right answer is your B. Okay makle, so when you are choosing the right answer, that's your B. B is your correct answer. Okay, moving on to the next question. Cells of dash tissues are living show angular thickenings. Makla helilla andre nijjalo beskonತೀರಾ ಕಣ್ರ ಅವಾಗಿಂದ ಇದನ್ನೇ ಬಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಕೂತಿದ್ದೆ ನಾನು. ಆಂಗ್ಯುಲಾರ್ ಥಿಕ್ಕನಿಂಗ್ಸ್, ರೇಷ್ಮಾ, ಸ್ವಾತಿ, ನೋಡು ಭುವನೇಶ್ವರಿ, ಅಷ್ಟು ವೆಲ್ ಟೀಚ್ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್, ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಓಕೆ ರಾಕಿ ಬಾಯ್, ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಹೇಳಪ್ಪ ರಾಕಿ ಬಾಯ್ ನೀನು. ಸಿ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. ತೇಜಸ್ಸು, ಅಂಜಲಿ, ಕೊರೋನಾ, ತುಪ್ಪು, ನಯನ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಕಣ್ರು. ಇವನು ಯೋಗೇಶ್ವರ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ಬೇಕಂದ ಅವಾಗಿಂದನೂ ನೋಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಅಬ್ಬಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟವನವನು, ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಹೇಳೋ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಾವನವನು ಬಾಯ್ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇವಾಗ. ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಕಣ್ರೋ. ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಗಿವನ್ ಅ ಪ್ರಾಪರ್ ಆನ್ಸರ್. ಸೊ collenchyma, what is the answer ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ? collenchyma. So the cells of the collenchyma tissues are living and they provide what ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ? Angular thickenings. Very good ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. Moving on to the fourth question. What is it? Which one of the following tissues has a dead cells with thick and lignified walls having a few and numerous pits? Pits ಅನ್ನೋದು ನೀಟಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ತಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಪಿಟ್ಸ್ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ಎಲ್ಲಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಪಿಟ್ಸ್ ಯೂಶಲಿ ಡೆಡ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಕಣ್ರೋ. ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಮಾ ಸ್ವಾತಿ, ತೇಜಸ್ಸು, ಎಸ್ಸು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ಯಮ್ಮ ಎಸ್ಸು. ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಇಲ್ವೇನ್ರೋ? Good makle, and the answer is children sclerenchyma. Okay, what is the answer makle? Sclerenchyma. Okay, which of the following tissues have a dead cells that are nothing but your sclerenchyma cells? Moving ahead, the next one. Both apical meristem and the intercalary meristem are dash meristems. Edra, fifth one. Apical meristem and the intercalary meristem. Bhumika B. Big answer ಹೇಳಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. ರೋಹಿತ್, ಗುಡ್ ರೋಹಿತ್. ನಿತ್ಯಾಸ್ ಬಿ. ಅಮ್ಮು ತಪ್ಪು ಕಣೋ. ಜ್ಯೋತಿ, ಯಾಕೆ ಇವತ್ತೇನು ಆನ್ಸರೇ ಮಾಡ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ನೀನು? ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ, ಅದು ಇವತ್ತು ತಪ್ಪು ಬೇರೆ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ. ಮುಲ್ಲು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಹೇಳ್ಬಾರ್ದು. ರಾಕಿ ಬಾಯ್ ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ನೀನು. ಹೂ ಕಣೋ ಮನೋಜು, ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು ಕಣೋ, ಅಂತ ಬರ್ದಿದ್ಯಲ್ಲೋ. ಮೇಘನಾ, ಯಾಕಮ್ಮ ಈ ಸಲ ಇವತ್ತು ತಪ್ಪು? ನೆನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ದಲ್ಲೋ. ಕೃಷ್ಣ, ಕೃಷ್ಣನು ಸೂಪರ್ ಆಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಬಿಡಪ್ಪ. ಓಕೆ, ಗುಡ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಇಟ್? ಬೋತ್ apical meristem and the intercalary meristem. Okay, both apical meristem and the intercalary meristem are your primary meristems. ಏನು ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ? Primary meristems. Moving ahead, the next one. Given figure, choose the particular answer ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಇದು. ABCD ಲೇಬ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಇದೆ, ಕ್ಲೀನ್ ಆಗಿ ನೋಡಿ ಏನು ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಅಂತ. ABCD ನೀಟಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ರೋ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. ಏನು ರೋ ನೀಟಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ರೋ. ಮಿಸ್ ಮಲ್ಲು ಅಲ್ಲ ಮಾಲು. ಸಾರಿ ಕಣೋ, ಅದು ನೀನು ಹಂಗೆ ಕಣೋ ಬರ್ದಿರೋದು, ನೋಡೋ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಸಂಪ್ರೀತಾ ಡೆವಿಲ್. ಯಾಕಮ್ಮ ಅಷ್ಟು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಹೆಸರು ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಡೆವಿಲ್ ಅಂತ ಹಾಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ಯಾ. ಬಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾ. ಅಪ್ಪು, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಾ. ರಕ್ಷಿತ್, ಓಕೆ ಕಣೋ, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಕೊಡಿರಾ. ಜಿ ನಿಸರ್ಗ ಇಲ್ಲ ಕಣೋ, ಅಷ್ಟು ಸಿ ಬರ್ದಿದ್ಯಾ, ಬಟ್ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಕಣೋ ಆಯ್ತಾ. ಏನಮ್ಮ ಅದು? ಓಕೆ, ಬಿ ಇಲ್ಲ ಕಣ್ರೋ. ಡಿ. ಭೂಮಿಕಾ, ಏನೋ ಬರ್ದಿದ್ಯಲ್ಲಪ್ಪ ಭೂಮಿಕಾ. ಓಕೆ, ಅಂತ ನಥಿಂಗೋ. ನಿನ್ನೆನೂ ಹಿಂಗೆ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಕಣೋ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ನೀನು. ಓಕೆ, ಬಿಜಿಲ್ ಬೇರೆ. ಇರ್ಲಿ. ಬಿ ಮಿಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಕಣೋ ಚಂದನ, ಬಿ ಅಲ್ಲ ಕಣೋ. ಡಿ ನೋಡ್ರೋ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿ ಏನಿದೆಯೋ, ಸಿ ಇಸ್ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ಬಟ್ ಯೋ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಸಬ್ಸಿಡರಿ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್. ಏನು ಇಟ್ಸ್ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ಬಟ್ ಯೋರ್ ಸ್ಟೋಮಾ. ಬಿ ಏನು ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ? ಗಾರ್ಡ್ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್. ಡೋಂಟ್ ಗೆಟ್ ಕನ್ಫ್ಯೂಸ್ಡ್. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ದ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಇಸ್ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ಬಟ್ ಯೋರ್ ಡಿ. ಡಿ ಇಸ್ ದ ಆಪ್ಷನ್. ಮೂವಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್ ಟು ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್. ಮ್ಯಾಚ್ ದ ಫಾಲೋಯಿಂಗ್. ಬೇಗ ಮತ್ತೆ ಮ್ಯಾಚ್ ದ ಫಾಲೋಯಿಂಗ್. ಬೇಗ ಮಾಡ್ರೋ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. ಮ್ಯಾಚ್ ದ ಫಾಲೋಯಿಂಗು. ತಪ್ಪು ಕೊಂಡ್ರೋ. ಏನ್ರೋ? ನೀಟಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಿ ನೋಡ್ರೋ. ನೀಟಾಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ರ. Okay, okay, makle. So the right answer, okay, for the 7th one, look at it, the particular thing. The 7th one, the right answer is your B. Okay, what is A? A is your vessels. So individual members interconnected through your perforations. Okay, so B, it's usually your tracheids. Tracheids are your elongated cells. Okay, and C, xylem fibers, which have highly thickened obliterated central lumen. So the option will be your B. Moving on to the next one. Sclerites are present in. Sclerites are present in. ನೀಟಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ರೋ, ಇದನ್ನ ಅದನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಟ್ಟೆ ನಾನು. Sclerites are present in. ಮೊಲ್ಲು ಸಿ, ಬಯಾಲಜಿ ಡಿ. ಯಾರೋ 3 ಜನ ಬಯಾಲಜಿ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀರಮ್ಮ, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ, ಸಖತ್ತಾಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಬಯಾಲಜಿ ಬಯಾಲಜಿ ಬಯಾಲಜಿ. ಓ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಬಯಾಲಜಿ. ಬಯಾಲಜಿ 1 ಬಯಾಲಜಿ 2 ಅಂತ ಹಾಕೊಳ್ರ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಅದಾದ್ರೂ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಯಾವ ಬಯಾಲಜಿ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ. ಚಿನ್ನು ಡಿ. ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇಲ್ದಿರೋದೆಲ್ಲ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಡ್ರೋ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ, ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇರೋದು ಹೇಳ್ರೋ ಕಂದಮ್ಮ. ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಾ. ಕೃಷ್ಣ, ಅಕ್ಷತಾ, ಚಂದನ, ಸಿಂಧು, ಜ್ಯೋತಿ, ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ ಬಿಡ್ರಿ. ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಕಣ್ರೋ. ಓಕೆ, ನಥಿಂಗ್. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ ನೋಡಿ ನೀನು ಇವಾಗ. ಮನೋಜ್, ಓನ್ಲಿ 1 ಬಯಾಲಜಿ. ಆಯ್ತಮ್ಮ ಆಯ್ತಮ್ಮ ಆಯ್ತಮ್ಮ. ಓಕೆನಾ? ಸೂಪರ್ ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ, ಸೂಪರ್, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್. ಯಾ, okay, so all of these is the answer. All of these is the answer. Okay, moving on to the next question. Which are the following tissue system constitute bulk of the plant body? ಹೇಳ್ರೋ, ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇರೋದು ಯಾವುದು? ಬಲ್ಕ್, ತುಂಬಾ ಇರೋದು ಯಾವುದು? ಕಾರ್ಟೆಕ್ಸ್ ರೀಜನ್. ಏನು ಕಾರ್ಟೆಕ್ಸ್ ರೀಜನ್ ಆದ್ರೆ ಯಾವ್ದಾಗಿರಬಹುದು? ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. ಐ ವಾಂಟ್ ಯು ಟು ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಪ್ರಾಪರ್ಲಿ. ಓಕೆ, ನೀಟಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ರೋ, ತುಂಬಾ ಯಾವ್ದು ಇರೋದು? ಯಾವ ಟಿಶ್ಯೂಸ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇದೆ? ಇಸ್ ಇಟ್ ಎಪಿಡರ್ಮಲ್, ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಅಥವಾ ವ್ಯಾಸ್ಕ್ಯುಲಾರ? ನೀಟಾಗಿ ನೋಡಿ. ಒಬ್ರು ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಬರ್ದಿಲ್ಲ. ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಅಕ್ಷತಾ, ಯೋಗೇಶ್ವರಿ, ಇವಾಗ ಬರ್ತಾಯ್ತಪ್ಪ ಒಂದೊಂದು ಆನ್ಸರು. ಅಕ್ಷತಾ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಾ. ಓಕೆ, ಚಿನ್ನು ಬಿ. ಇದೇನಿದು ಸುಮಾ ಅಂತ ಬರ್ದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಚಿನ್ನು ಬಿ ಅಂತ ಬರೀತಿದ್ದೀರಾ? ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಎನಿವೆ ಬಿ ಅಂತಾನೆ ತಗೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. ಚಿನ್ನು ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಗ್ರೂಪಲ್ಲಿ. ಓಕೆ, ನಿತ್ಯ, ಕೃಷ್ಣ, ಬಿ, ಮನೋಜ್, ನಥಿಂಗ್. ಏನೋ ಫುಲ್ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಬರೀತಿದ್ಯಾ, ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇರೆ ಇಮೋಜಿ ಬೇರೆ ಕಳಿಸ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ, ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. ರಾಕಿ ಬೈ, ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಾ. ಓಕೆ, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್. ಪುಷ್ಪ, ಶಶಿ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಸೊ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಇಸ್ ಏನ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ? ದ ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಟಿಶ್ಯೂ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್. ಓಕೆ, ಮೂವಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್ ಟು ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್. ವಿಚ್ ಪ್ಲಾಂಟ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಪೊಸೆಸಸ್ ಪಾಲಿಯಾರ್ಕ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್? ಮಕ್ಕಳ, ನೀವು ಇದನ್ನ ಹೇಳಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನನ್ನ ಕೈಲಿ ಉಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂತೀರ ಕಣ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತು. ಪಾಲಿಯಾರ್ಕ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಎರಡೆರಡು ಸಲ ಹೇಳಿದೀನಿ ನಾನು ಇದನ್ನ, ಇವಾಗ ಹೇಳಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸರಿ ಉಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂತೀರ ಕಣ್ರ. ರಿಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡ್ರೋ ಬೇಗ. ತಪ್ಪು ರೇಷ್ಮಾ. ದ್ರಾಕ್ಷಾಯಿನಿ, ಸಾರಿ ಕಣೋ, ನಿನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ದಾಕ್ಷಾಯಿನಿ ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೋದು ನಾನು. ತಪ್ಪುಕೊಂಡ್ರೋ ಲೋ, ಅದು ನೀಟಾಗಿ ಹೇಳಿದೀನಿ ಮಕ್ಳೇ. ಓಕೆ, ಐ ಗಿವ್ ಯು, ಇಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ಕ್ಲೂ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ, 2ಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಆನ್ ಆಗಿ. ರೂಟಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿರೋದು ನೀವು ಇದನ್ನ, ರೂಟಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿರೋದು. ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಪ್ರಜ್ವಲ್, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ರೇಹಾ, ಸಂಪ್ರಿತ್. ಇವತ್ತು ಯಾಕೋ ನೊಟೋರಿಯಸ್ ಬಂದಿಲ್ವಲ್ಲ ಗ್ರೂಪಲ್ಲಿ? ಬಿಜಿಲ್, ಬಿಜಿಲ್ ಅಂತ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅಂತ ಬರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲ ನೀನು. ನಿಸರ್ಗ ಬಿ, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಮಾ, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್. ಚಿನ್ನು ಬಿ, ಓಕೆ ಮಾ, ಓಕೆ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ನಥಿಂಗ್. ಏನೋ ಫುಲ್ ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಿದ್ಯಲ್ಲ. ಮನೋಜ್, ನಿತ್ಯ, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಪುಟ. ಓಕೆ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. ಓಕೆ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಶಶಿ, ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಏನಾದರೂ ಕೊಡ್ತಿದ್ಯಪ್ಪ ನನಗೆ, ಎ ಬಿ ಅಂತ. ಓಕೆ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ದ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಇಸ್ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ ಮೊನೊಕಾಟ್ ರೂಟ್. ಏನು ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ? ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಇಸ್ ಮೊನೊಕಾಟ್ ರೂಟ್. ಓಕೆ, ಮೂವಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್ ಟು ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್. ಹೈಪೋಡರ್ಮಿಸ್ ಇನ್ ಡ್ಯಾಶ್ ಇನ್ ಸನ್ಫ್ಲವರ್. ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ ಒಂದು ತಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ, ಹೈಪೋಡರ್ಮಿಸ್ ಅನ್ನುವಾಗ ಮೈ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಟು ಯು. ಸನ್ಫ್ಲವರ್ ಅಂತ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸನ್ಫ್ಲವರ್ ಯಾವ ಸ್ಟೆಮ್ಮು? ಡೈಕಾಟ, ಮೊನೊಕಾಟ, ಅದನ್ನು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿ. ಅಂಡ್ ಡ್ಯಾಶ್ ಇನ್ ಮೇಸ್, ಅದನ್ನು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿ. ಹೈಪೋಡರ್ಮಿಸ್ ಒತ್ತೊತ್ತಿ 2 ಸಲ ಹೇಳಿದೀನಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ ನಾನು ಇದನ್ನ. ಸೊ ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ತಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ, ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ತಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಮ್ಯಾಮ್ ಐ. ಏನಮ್ಮ ಗೊಂಬೆ ಐ ಅಂತ ಎಲ್ಲದಿಯಮ್ಮ ಗೊಂಬೆ? ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್, ಎಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಹಾಕಿದಿರಮ್ಮ. ಸಿ ಅಂತೆ. ಜಿ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಪ್ಪ ನೀನು. ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಕಾವ್ಯ. ಅಪ್ಪು, ಚಿನ್ನು ಬಿ ಸೂಪರ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ತೀಯಮ್ಮ ಚಿನ್ನು. ನೀನು ಹೆಸರು ಚೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ ನೀನು, ನಿನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಬೇರೆ ತರ ಬರ್ತೈತಿ ಇವಾಗ. ಆ ನಥಿಂಗು ಬಿ ಸೂಪರ್ ಕಣ. ಶಿವರಾಜು ವಿದ್ಯಾವತಿ ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಾ. ಮನೋಜ್, ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿ, ಅಕ್ಷತಾ, ನಿನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಕಾಣ್ಬೇಕಂತ ಕೃಷ್ಣ ಮೊದಲನೇ ದಿನದಿಂದನೂ ಬಿಬಿ 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 ಅಂತ ಹಾಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಡಪ್ಪ ನೀನು. ಬಿ ಮಿಸ್. ಓಕೆ ಕಣ್ರಪ್ಪ. ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್. ಓಕೆ, colon-chymatus and sclerenchymatus. So that's an option. Now, moving on to the next question. Which one of the following condition of the xylem is present in both monocots and the dicots? ನೀಟಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ರು. ಸ್ಟೆಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿರೋದು. ಸ್ಟೆಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು? ಎಂಡಾರ್ಕಾ, ಎಕ್ಸಾರ್ಕಾ, ನೀಟಾಗಿ ನೋಡಿ. ಮೀಸಾರ್ಕಾ, ಪಾಲಿಯಾರ್ಕಾ. ಮೀಸಾರ್ಕ್ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಇಲ್ವೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಬಿಡಿ, ಏನಕ್ಕಂದ್ರೆ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಇನ್ ಮಿಡಲ್. ಪಾಲಿಯಾರ್ಕ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಮೆನಿ. Okay, endarca, exarca. Mesoarc means where your xylem is completely surrounded by your phloem. Okay, stemmal enu? ನನ್ನ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ನನ್ನ ನೇಮ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅಯ್ಯೋ ಲಾರಿಕಾ, ನಿನ್ನೆ ಹೇಳೋದಲ್ಲಮ್ಮ ಹೆಸರು. ಬೇಜಾರು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಬಿಡ ಕಣೋ ಲಾರಿಕಾ, ಮನ್ಸಿಗೆ ಹಚ್ಕೊಂಬಿಡ ಕಣ್ರೋ. ಓಕೆನಾ, ಬೇಜಾರು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಬಿಡಿ. ಅದು ಏನಾಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಫುಲ್ಲು ಹಿಂದೆ ಓದ್ತಾನೆ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ತಿಪ್ಪೇಸ್ವಾಮಿ ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಬರ್ದಿಯ ಕಣ. ಕಾವ್ಯ, ಮಲ್ಲಿಕಾರ್ಜುನ, ಯೋಗೇಶ್ವರ್ ತಪ್ಪು ಕಣ. ಅಕ್ಷತಾ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಕಣ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಶಶಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಾ. ಓಕೆ, ಸ್ವಾತಿ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಕಣ. ವರ್ಷಿತಾ, ಸಿಂಧು, ಪುಷ್ಪ, ಚಂದನ. ಹೆಸರು ಹೇಳಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಬೇಜಾರು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಬಿಡಿ ಮಕ್ಳೇ. ಅನುಷಾ, ಓಕೆನಾ. ರಾಕಿ ಬಾಯ್ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡವನೆ. ನಥಿಂಗು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ನುಸ್ರತ. ಓಕೆಪ್ಪ. ಜೆ ನೋಡ, ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡ್ರ. ಸಂಪ್ರೀತಾ, ನಯನ. ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಾ, ಸೂಪರ್ ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಕ್ಳೇ. ಓಕೆ, ಐ ಆಮ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಆನ್ಸರಿಂಗ್ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಗೊಂಬೆ, ನಾನು ನಿನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಅವಾಗಲೇ ಹೇಳ್ದೆ ಗೊಂಬೆ. ಇದು ಮೋಸ ಪಾಪ. ಇನ್ನ ಹೇಳಿಲ್ದಿರೋದು ಹೆಸರು ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. ಮಕ್ಳೇ, ಒಂದ್ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ, ನಾನು ಎರಡೂ ಓದ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಇವತ್ತೆಲ್ಲ ಓದ್ತಿರ್ತೀನಿ ಕಣ್ರು. ಸೂಪರ್ ಕಣೋ ಶಿವರಾಜು, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಮಕ್ಳೇ. ಓಕೆ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಸೊ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಇಸ್ ಏನ್ ಮಕ್ಳೇ? ಎಂಡಾಕ್. ಏನು ಮಕ್ಳೇ ಆನ್ಸರು? ಎಂಡಾಕ್. ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಸೊ ರೂಟಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೋ? ರೂಟಲ್ಲಿ ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್. ನಾವು ಸ್ಟೀಲ್ ಇನ್ಕ್ಲೂಡ್ಸ್. ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ರೋ. ವಾಟ್ ಡಸ್ ಅ ಸ್ಟೀಲ್ ಇನ್ಕ್ಲೂಡ್ಸ್? What does a steel includes? Yes, Mashilpa. Tell me the answer, Mashilpa, now. Akshata. Yes. Yes also answered. Yes. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪಿಂಕಿ. ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಾ. ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಯೋರ್ ನೇಮ್? ರಾಕಿ, ನಿನ್ನೆ ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಗೆ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೇನೋ ನೀನು? ಲಾಸ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಕೇಳಿದ್ದು? ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ತಾನೇ ಕೇಳಿದ್ದು. ಉಷಾ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಪ್ರಜ್ವಲ್, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಾ. ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಬಾಸು, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಕ್ಳೇ. ದಿಸ್ ಒನ್ ಬಿಜಿಲ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ. ಸ್ವಾತಿ, ಕೊರೋನಾನು ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೈತಪ್ಪ ಕ್ಲಾಸಲ್ಲಿ. ಶಶಿ, ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸ್ ಪೂಜಾ. ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸಸ್ ಹಾಕಳಮ್ಮ ನಿನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು. ಪ್ರಸನ್ನ, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಮಕ್ಳೇ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಖುಷಿ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ ಕಣ್ರ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಓಕೆ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತೆ, ಓಲಿ ಬಿಡು, ಬರ್ಬೇಕು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಗೆ. ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಮಕ್ಳೇ. ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಇಸ್ all of this. ಏನರ ಆನ್ಸರು? ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಇಸ್ all of this. Moving on to the next question. In older trees, central dark colored not conducting part, secondary xylem, is referred to as. 14th question is referred to as. ನಾನು ಅದನ್ನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೆ, ಸೆಂಟ್ರಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆ. We are using it for the economical purpose and it is non decayable. ಡಿಕೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಆಯ್ತರಮ್ಮ, ಎಲ್ರು ಇದ್ದೀರಮ್ಮ, ನನ್ ಖುಷಿ ಆಗತ್ತೆ ಕಣ್ರ. ನಿತ್ಯ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಾ. ನಿತ್ಯ, ಮಲ್ಲಿಕಾರ್ಜುನ, ಭೂಮಿಕಾ, ಮಾಲು, ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಾ. ಸಹನಾ, ಶಿವಾನಿ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ನೋಡು ಗೊಂಬೆ, ತಪ್ಪು ಹೇಳಿದ್ಯಾ, ಸೊ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆಸರು ಹೇಳಲ್ಲ ನಾನು. ಶಶಿ, ಅಪ್ಪು, ಅರಾಳ, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ಯಾ ಕಣ. ಅಪ್ಪು ಅಂತ ಕರೀತೀನಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಓಕೆನಾ. ಸೊ ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಏನ್ರ? ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇಸ್ ಯೋರ್ heartwood. ಏನು ಮಕ್ಕಳೇ? ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇಸ್ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ಬಟ್ ಯೋರ್ heartwood. Now the next question. The secondary growth usually does not occur in. The secondary growth usually does not occur in. ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ, ಏನ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನೋಡಿ. ರಿಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡ್ರೋ, ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಯಾವ್ದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗಲ್ಲ? ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್, ಎಲ್ಲ ತಪ್ಪ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಾ. ಪ್ರಸನ್ನ, ದಾಕ್ಷಾಯಿಣಿ, ಶಿವರಾಜ್, ಬಯಾಲಜಿ 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 ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಬಯಾಲಜಿ 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 ಬಯಾಲಜಿ. ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಣ್ಣ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು 1 2 3 4 ಹಾಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ಅಂತ, ಅಥವಾ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬಯಾಲಜಿನೂ ಒಂದೇನಾ? ಬೇಕು ಬೇಕಂತ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಕಣ್ರ. ಇರ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ಲಿ ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಓಕೆನಾ. ರಾಕಿ ಬಾಯ್, ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಾ. ಆದ್ರೂ ನಮ್ಮ ಹೆಸರು ಬಯಾಲಜಿನ ಎತ್ತು ಹಿಂಗೆ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕ್ಲಾಸಲ್ಲೂ, ಒಳ್ಳೇದಾಗ್ಲಿ ನಿಮ್ಗೂ, ಆಯ್ತಾ. ಶ್ರೀದೇವಿ ತಪ್ಪು ಕಣೋ. ಚಿನ್ನು ಸಿ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ಮಾ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್ ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಒಂದು ಖುಷಿ ಏನಾಯ್ತು ಗೊತ್ತಾ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಬಯಾಲಜಿ ಒಂದೇನಾ ಬೇರೆದ ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಂದೇ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಸೊ ಒಳ್ಳೇದು. ನಿತ್ಯ, ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಾ. ನಿತ್ಯ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಜೆ ನೀನು ಇನ್ನೂ ಒಂದು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಆಗ್ಬಿಡಿ ಕಣೋ. ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಶಶಿ, ರೋಹಿತ್, ಅಕ್ಷತಾ, ಶಶಿ, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಕಣ್ರ. ಶಶಿ, ನಾನು ಇವಾಗ ತಾನೇ ನಿನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಹೇಳ್ದೆ. ಗೊಂಬೆ ನೋಡ್ದೆ, ನೋಡ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಗೊಂಬೆ, ಹಂಗೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತು. ಮ್ಯಾಮ್ ಬಯಾಲಜಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಕೋರ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಊನಮ್ಮ ಶಿಲ್ಪ, ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ಸ್ಕೋರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೂ ಖುಷಿ ಮಾ. ಖುಷಿ ಕಣ್ರೋ, ಓಕೆನಾ. ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇಸ್ ಸಿ. ನೌ ಮೂವಿಂಗ್ ಅಹೆಡ್, ದ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್. ಇದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ದೊಡ್ಡದಾಗಿದೆ, ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದಿಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ದ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್. ಓಕೆ, 16th ಒನ್ ದೊಡ್ಡದಾಗಿದೆ. ನೀಟಾಗಿ ನೋಡಿ ಲೇಬ್ಲಿಂಗ್ಸು, ನೀಟಾಗಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಬೇಗ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಹೊಡಿಬೋದು, ಬೇಗನೆ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಹೊಡಿಬೋದು. ದ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್. ಬೇಗ ಮಾಡ್ರೋ. ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಲೇಟಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಬೇಡಿ, ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ನೋಡಿ ನಾನು. ಬೇಗ ಮಾಡಿ ಮೇಡಮ್. ಮಿಸ್ ಏನಮ್ಮ ಇದು ಮೇಡಮ್? ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಏನು ಮ್ಯಾಮ್ ಇದು? ಆದರೂ ನೀವು ಮೇಡಮ್ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಏನಮ್ಮ ನಿಸರ್ಗ? ಮೇಡಮ್ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಪಿ ಯುನಲ್ಲಿ 1 ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಆದರೂ ನೀವು ಮೇಡಮ್. ನಾನೇನಮ್ಮ ನೀವು ಮೇಡಮ್ ಅಂದರೆ? ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್. ಓಕೆ, ವೆರಿ ಗುಡ್. ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್. ನಿಸರ್ಗ, ಐ ಆಮ್ ಟೇಕಿಂಗ್ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಪಿ ಯು ಪುಟ, ಸೊ ಐ ಡೋಂಟ್ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಐ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಡೂ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಪಿ ಯು. ಮ್ಯಾಮ್ ದಿನ ನೀವೇ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಓಕೆ ಕಣ್ರೋ, ಓಕೆ ಕಣ್ರೋ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಅನುಷಾ. ಲೈಫ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಂತೆ. ಸೂಪರ್ ಮಾ. ಓಕೆ, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್ ಕಣ್ರೋ. ಓಕೆ ಸ್ವೀಟಾರ್ಟ್ಸ್, ಸೊ ದ ಆಪ್ಷನ್ ಇಸ್ ಎ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ವಿತ್ ದಿಸ್ ಡಾರ್ಲಿಂಗ್ಸ್, ಐ ಆಮ್ ಎಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಅಪ್ ವಿತ್ ದ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. ಟೇಕ್ ಕೇರ್, ಬೈ ಬೈ, ಸಿ ಯು, ಟೇಕ್ ಕೇರ್ ಆಫ್ ಯುವರ್ ಹೆಲ್ತ್ ಡಾರ್ಲಿಂಗ್ಸ್. ಬೈ ಸ್ವೀಟಾರ್ಟ್ಸ್. ಆದರೂ ಮ್ಯಾಮ್ ಮಿಸ್ ಯು. ಓಕೆ ಮಾ, ಮಿಸ್ ಯು. ಓಕೆ ಮಾ. This darlings, I'm ending up with the class.